So this is the third video in a series. We're going to continue doing some analysis with Tidyverse that we started in the last one. So this time you should have downloaded um, a zip file called 3_Tidyverse, and in it is a RMD file called baby names, which is a script file, and then a data folder, and inside the data folder is the ma.txt. So this is the same data we worked with in the previous video. We're just going to take it a little bit further. So make sure those files are unzipped and in a folder where you know where they are, and then we're going to go out to RStudio and we're going to start a new project this time to give you practice on that whole creating a project thing. It's something you want to make sure you have down. So file, new project, point to that folder. So mine is down a few layers. There's my folder. Remember, you're not going to see anything. Well, you'll see a folder here, but nothing else. Say open and create project. It's going to churn for a minute. And then it's going to give us our, you'll see those things in the directory or in the lower right. This time we already have a script file started, so you're not going to create one. So click on baby names.rmd in the lower right file section, and it will open up in your script editor. So you'll see the top is pretty similar to what we had before, and then this first code chunk is really the two code chunks that we ran last time. So the first two. So it loads our libraries and imports our data. Go ahead and run that code chunk. You can push the run code chunk button here, run current code chunk, or use a keyboard shortcut. So now we have our data frame over here again, same as we did before. So here's another thing that sometimes is useful. If this is some base R code actually, and the names function, I'll run this chunk. It shows you the names of the columns in that data frame. This is super useful if your data frame has especially hundreds of columns and it's hard to remember what they're all called. I should also note that these names are case sensitive, so it really and R is case sensitive. So if you had names in your data frame that were uppercase or something, you'd have to type them that way. So I recommend going all lowercase. I can do a little cheat here. Like let's say this was originally crazy stuff. Here, I'm going to re-import this. I changed a couple of the column names, and so now, well, I'll do it here. Now we have state with a capital S and gender all capitalized. This is the kind of thing that you're not going to want, and so this is where the janitor package comes in handy. I'm going to add a pipe to the end of my import and say this function called clean names, open parens, close parens. If you attach that to the end of an import, I do it on all my imports, and I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to say run selected lines. And now if we look at our names again, I'll run this chunk of code. It has put them all into lowercase. The clean names will put things into lowercase. It'll get rid of spaces. If a column starts with a number or a symbol, it will wipe that out and start it with an X. It does a bunch of crazy things and really great things, and will save you a lot of headaches down the road. So that's what clean names. We're going to use that more in the subsequent lessons when we do have some kind of messier data to bring in. Okay, so let's repeat what we did in the last lesson real quick. So go and insert a code chunk and write a query filtering to the year 2018. See if you can remember what you learned. Hit pause for a second. Okay, so what you should have done is go to the insert menu, choose insert R. You always start with the name of your data frame and then a pipe, and then in this case we want to filter year equals 2018. And this having these names of these columns up here above really helps remembering that in this case year is actually YR. So that's good to have. And remember, this is a number, not a character, so it doesn't need quotes around it. Let's run that chunk. There we go, 1,803 babies' names from 2018. And remember, each row is a name from a year, so it's not like the number of babies. We're going to get to know this data a little bit better. So this is something else we did in the last one, where except we did girls last time, but let's find all the boys from 2018 and show the name and the number of births. Well, we haven't put them in any form or fashion yet. It looks like it's doing it for us, but we can use that arrange verb to tell it to put it in the order with the largest number of births at top. And Benjamin there is at the top by a pretty good margin above Liam. And all the way down to 82, Zaire, there were 5 babies. Notice there's not less than 5. So when you read the documentation on this data, it will tell you that it's only going to include names where there were 5 or more babies born that year who also got a Social Security card, so or a number technically. So there's filter, select, and arrange, which we covered in the last session, and you've kind of repeated here. That's the bones and the very basics of dplyr. You're going to use these quite a bit, not always in every query, but you will use them quite a bit. So let's get a little more complicated here. The filter, as you saw in the last example, we can use more than one things. So this comma here is saying, show me the records where it's 2018 and the number of births was greater than or equal to 300. And so it's only going to include those really most popular names. Now, that comma represents the and. The or could be, we could do where it's, we could do, let's do a little something different where we say name equal Benjamin, and then you can do a pipe, which is just above the enter key, and say name equal Emma, those 2 most popular names. And it's going to give us all the years that those names, oh, we need to show the year though, maybe in our select line. So that would be one way to do or. The other way to do or is, especially if it's from the same column like it is here, you can say in, and then you list the things you want. And so you could make a long list. I'm going to put Mary in there. And it's going to give us all those years again. But that huge chunk is kind of a way to say, give me any of these names that I've listed here. It's kind of an or. And then we could also say year equal 2018. So say, give me those 3 names, but only from 2018. There we go. So you should just get 3 records. Yeah, Mary's not so popular anymore. So our code has gotten a little long here, as you can see. So let's introduce a concept of indenting. So when you're typing away here, and you do a pipe, if you hit enter after the pipe, it will automatically indent for you. And the key is that the pipe always has to be at the end of the line, never at the beginning of a line. So this one is using that indented code, and we'll try to do that here as we go along. It tends to make your code a little more readable. The other thing you can do is you can add annotations here. You can do a comment box and say filtering to Evelyn born in 2009 or later, and that this will not disturb your code. It's an annotation. So let's run that. So this is just Evelyn, and notice I didn't display Evelyn, but there's the number of births each year over the last 10 years. And you'll see we've got 10 rows. We asked for 10 years of data. All right. So up until now, we've just kind of been filtering our data either by rows or by columns or both. the thing that we often do with data is to summarize it. And in if you have used Excel, that is usually done with a pivot table, maybe a sum function, but you probably used a pivot table for a lot of what we're going to do next. There's a summarize verb in dplyr that allows you to do math on your data. So we'll do a really basic one here first. We're going to say use the baby names table, and then you have to put the pipe in. And then we're going to say summarize, and we want to know the number of records in this table. And num records is my label here. I'm labeling this answer. That's all I'm doing. But this n open parens close parens is a function that will count the records that meet all the criteria of your query. So if we say, if we do it this way, where we say look at baby names and count all the records, it's going to give us the same number that we see up here in our environment. It's the total number of records. But if we say filter year equal 2018, now we're telling it only count the records from 2018, and we're going to get a much lower number, 1,803. So this n open parens close parens is the key thing to know when you want to count records, and that is a common thing we do in pivot tables, especially if each record is a thing or a place or a event or like a police call or something like that. And this syntax here, I'm just putting in a label here so that it'll display it. Notice it says num records down here. It'll display it there. And sometimes we need this, and we're going to need that here. You'll see that here in a minute. So inside summarize, you can count records, but you can also sum the values of a column or do some other math on the values in a column. So for example, you could find the lowest value, the highest value, the average. In this case, the syntax is mean. But you do all that inside summarize. So in this case, we want to count the number of births in 2018. And so if you remember, the structure of our table is that each row is a name, and then it tells you how many babies with that name were born that year. So in order to count the number of babies born that year, we need to sum the number of births. This query we did above with 1,803 records in 2018, that means there were 1,803 names of babies recorded in that data set that year. Now we're going to count the actual babies, and this is going to give us much bigger number, 52,000 babies in that 1 year. And notice that I did not give this a label, and so it just displays this sum num births. But I can say, I can put a label here, num births equal. And this, you don't need two equals here, it's just a single equal. And now I have a label here, and that's can be kind of useful. Okay, so that's just some basic summarizing of our entire data set. Let's move on to group by queries. If you've used SQL, this is going to look really familiar. If you've used Excel, this is a pivot table where we're going to summarize, we're going to make some rows in our pivot table. So think about this first question: how many boys were born and how many girls were born in 2018? So notice I said 2018, so that means we need to filter just down to 2018, and then envision your answer. You want to count. You want a list of how many girls, or you want the girls, the boys, and a number next to each one. And so that's where group by comes into play. Group by is how you tell it which buckets to make or which piles to make, or think about playing cards, and you put all your queens together and all your jacks together and all your number 8 cards together. That's what we're doing here. We're putting all the girl records together and all the boy records together. And then because of the way this operation works, what's going to happen is the summarize is going to do its work on the girl bucket, and then it's going to do its work on the boy bucket, and it's going to return 2 numbers. In this case, we're doing that same thing we did before and calling it num babies, but we're going to get 2 numbers instead of just 1. So 24,000 roughly were girls and 28,000 were boys. And it's giving us 2 rows. Let's check if you've been paying attention. Will this code work? Hit pause on the video and run this and see what you get. Okay, so if we come back and run this, it's going to throw an error message. Why? Oh, there's actually 2 error messages. It doesn't. This is a grouping thing. It's struggling with grouping, but it's not giving us any answers. Why didn't it work? Well, if you remember that R is case sensitive, and the names in there are stored in proper case, not uppercase. So if we do it this way, then we will see all the Marys born each year back in time. Okay, so now it is your turn. I want you to hit pause and try to insert a code chunk and write your own query to answer these 3 questions down here, and then come back to the video to get the answer. Okay, so here's the answers to those queries. They're all fairly similar, just a little changes in the filter. Group by year to get the total babies born each year. Filter to the girls, and then the group by is the same to get the number of female babies born each year. And then how many babies named Francis were born each year. Now, let me throw you for a curveball here a little bit. Let's add a second group by. We'll add gender. Oh, looky, looky, there were 5 boys born in 1917. And there's a whole bunch more in these other years. So we have both boys and girls being with that name. But by double grouping them, you could see the different figures each year. So there you go.